Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So I realized I have not posted very much at all in 2022, so I'm sorry about that. I feel like this year has just kind of sucked, honestly. Like, there's just been a lot going on and I have not had the time, energy, or desire to film. I've just been really struggling with, I think, wanting to write reviews and sit down and film, and yeah, I mean, it's just like a whole bunch of stuff going on. I guess I'm starting this video off with a little life update before I try to catch up on some December reviews. But yeah, basically, like, I don't know. I mean, with getting COVID around my birthday and just like taking a while to recover from that, like, that was not fun. Work has been really stressful. There's just a lot of chaotic things happening and we're trying to get it more organized. None of it's my fault, but it just feels like there's that extra stress and pressure, so that's not fun. And then the house hunt has been stressful also. But I do have good news, at least on that front. We did actually get an offer accepted, so the plan is, you know, we're getting it inspected and everything right now, but the plan is to move into our new house in mid-April, assuming, again, everything goes according to plan. So that's really exciting, and I think that's like a huge relief. So hopefully, you know, I'll start to feel a little bit better about actually like doing booktube and social media again. I basically, yeah, like haven't done booktube, haven't watched any booktube really. I have had little desire to go on social media at all because I find it just really, yeah, it just gives me a lot of anxieties, particularly Discord, because I feel like there's just so much stuff that I feel obligated to catch up on that I just don't want to do it at all. So yeah, anyway, there's a brief rundown of everything that's kind of been going on, but yeah, I also feel like I've been reluctant to start filming again because there's just so many videos that I have to catch up on. So I'll do my best, but these are obviously way delayed. I'm talking about books that I read in December, but you know, what can you do? My goal is to get back into doing a weekly reading update, but since I'm behind, I think I'm going to just put these into chunks of 10 books at a time so that, you know, I can make some progress, but it's not, hopefully, an overwhelmingly long video. So yeah, we'll jump into this. Leave your favorite emoji in the comments to let me know that you're here, but like always, we'll move from the lowest to the highest rated. Also, I'm sorry about the lighting. It is more overcast than I expected today, and I'm too lazy to get out my light, my ring light to help. So the first book I will talk about today is a 2-star book, and that's The Goal by Elle Kennedy. So I did this as a buddy read with Kat from Brews and Reviews, and this is the 4th book in this off-campus series. So this is an adult romance, and we follow Sabrina and Tucker. So Sabrina has had her future planned out, and she's going to go to law school, but she ends up accidentally getting pregnant. And that's basically the story. So this was so disappointing, especially compared to the others in the series. It just wasn't the same sort of addictive, exciting quality, and neither Kat or I were really drawn to reading it each day. I felt like an afterthought almost, with the relationship just being not as developed, and it really didn't feel like they needed their own book. It kind of resets the timeline to catch us up on something that is revealed in the 3rd book. And yeah, I mean, it's like the major issue here is basically just like this pregnancy and Sabrina's stepdad being a creepy asshole. So yeah, I just didn't love most of the book being about the pregnancy. That's not very motivating for me to read about, and I just didn't care for it. There was also a lot of like really dumb miscommunication bullshit, which I have no patience for. And I hated how Sabrina does things kind of one-sided because of what she thinks Tucker wants, instead of just like talking to him and believing him when he says things. So she's been kind of alone for most of her life, so like I get her attitude, I guess, to some extent, but it's just kind of over the top and annoying. So I did appreciate her drive to go to law school though and make a better life for herself. Tucker, I think, is very sweet, but he doesn't seem to have much of a presence or personality. It's basically just like Southern gentleman, and that's pretty much it. But I did like how he stood by Sabrina and tries to help as much as possible, and I do think he is a good dad. So yeah, this was my least favorite entry in the series, and we both decided that there's like a collection of short stories that comes after this that's like, you know, epilogues for each of the couples, and we're like, we had been planning on reading it, but after this one, we were both like, I don't know about that. So I think we're just done with this world, and yeah. This was a disappointing note to end on for a series, but, you know, it happens. So the other 2-star book I have is Ransacker by Emmy Laybourne. This is YA urban fantasy, and it's like more historical feeling, and it's the sequel to Berserker, so think of it as like Vikings meets Little House on the Prairie. The first book was much better than this. I would not suggest reading the sequel, unfortunately. Basically, we have Sissel and her family trying to blend in America, but there's a spy watching on them to report their powers to a baron who wants to control them, so this was just pretty boring for the most part, honestly. It focused a lot more on the daily life and, like the Wild West than their powers, though this does kind of play a role. But it felt like a lot of the story meandered aimlessly, and the language feels like really young YA and simplistic. I do generally like the time period and the atmosphere. I think it does a good job making it feel like this era for the most part. I continue to enjoy the different types of powers that we get here and how they come with a cost. I didn't feel like there was a lot at stake, though, for most of the book. This is told from points of view of Hannah, who is the older sister who we follow in the first book more, and Sissel, who's the younger sister. So Hannah is just so much more exciting, and I wish we could just have only her point of view again. She's trying to take care of the family, and I like that she's a female berserker because, that's something you don't see all that often, and she is very protective of her family, and I generally like seeing them all together. Sissel, on the other hand, is obnoxious. She's one of these characters that's like almost too stupid to live, and she just makes some ridiculously dumb decisions, and she's impulsive and irritating. However, there's some good things. I did like her ransacker abilities, at least, to find metals, but it's just so much moaning, and I don't know, she refuses to listen to reason, she's kind of selfish, and I think, so her family does treat her as a child, as they probably should, but she wants to, have her opinion heard, which, okay, but she just needs to grow up, basically. So she has had some health problems and is kind of weak, but she does change over the books. I also didn't like the romance here. It's kind of cringy and weird. We do have Pinkerton agents watching this family and this old foe returning, but I kind of felt like this was just all thrown together at the end, and generally not a great sequel. Unfortunately, would not recommend this, and I will be unhauling this and the previous one just because I, don't think I'm going to reread that. But if you are interested in that, Vikings meets Little House on the Prairie, definitely, I would suggest picking up the first book, but again, don't pick up the second one. So now I have a couple of 3-star books to talk to you about, and the first one is The Matzah by Jean Meltzer. So this is an adult romance following Rachel, who's a Jewish girl who loves Christmas, and she's actually a best-selling Christmas novelist. Her publisher now wants her to write a Hanukkah romance, and this forces Rachel to work with her summer camp archenemy at the Matzah Ball, which is essentially like a Jewish music celebration on the last day of Hanukkah. So I liked but didn't love this. The pacing was okay. There were actually some parts that I struggled to get through. There is some humor throughout, and I did like exploring chronic illness here, so this feels really realistic. I think the author also has, I can't remember exactly what it was, because again, I read this back in December, but the author also has this disease, so it's nice to see this representation in books. And, I liked the general premise and having both Christmas and Hanukkah here. The major thing I disliked, though, was this miscommunication trope. I just really, really hate miscommunication. It is obnoxious, and I felt stressed out at times because I just wanted them to talk to each other. I liked the idea of these camp, arch enemies and enemies to lovers romance, but I kind of felt so-so about their chemistry. Rachel I mostly liked. She does try to live her life, but has to conserve energy at times because of her disease. So she's actually not very open about her disease or her secret Christmas writer career. It's nice to see her gain confidence about these things and be okay showing it to the world. I felt for her a lot of times, she's trying to do what she thinks is best for her family since they're pretty well known in the Jewish community, but she's also not really being true to herself, so I liked how she's not really here for Jacob's nonsense. She actually does have several clever ideas, and I feel like I would have liked to see her explore them even more. Jacob is okay. I think he's really misguided sometimes and thinks that pranks as an adult are a good way to rekindle a relationship, which was rather cringy. He tries to be a problem solver, and while he's trying to be nice with some things, he does make some sort of one-sided decisions without asking people what they'd like. So I think he has a lot of guilt about complicated family matters, so he doesn't always feel like he deserves to be happy, which is kind of sad. But so then we have Mickey, who's Rachel's best friend, who was nice. I really liked him and how supportive he is. he's a great friend, and I do wish we had seen him a little bit more. So I think my favorite character may have been Jacob's grandmother, because she's pretty great. She's a very strong woman, and she's like really not going to put up with Jacob's antics, and is also a good cook. But yeah, so this was decent. I wouldn't reread it necessarily, and I definitely, you know, had some problems with like the pacing and just like the miscommunication, all that stuff. But I do think there were some things that I did enjoy for it. So yeah, this was more mixed for me, but if you're, I think, interested in that premise, then it's worth checking out. The other 3-star book I have is Split Feather by Deborah A. Wolfe. So this is adult urban fantasy where we follow Siggy, who was taken from her family as a child and suffers from a hot temper, cluster headaches, and sees demons. So she ends up saving the life of an assassin sent to kill her and travels to Alaska to find out who she is. So this was kind of strange, honestly. It felt like there are two distinct halves that didn't entirely mesh well together. The pacing was okay. I think the second half was definitely much more interesting, but I feel like I'm not really sure what the overall story arc was. The first half just feels almost like a contemporary book with the addition of these demons that may or may not be real. And the second half gets more into supernatural bits with, I think, Alaskan folklore. And this was obviously much more interesting to me, but I still feel confused about the demons. I don't know what their purpose is, like what are they? I don't know. There's a mention of a Wendigo at some point, but this doesn't go anywhere, which is really disappointing. Siggy, as the main character, is okay. She's rather abrasive and ill-tempered, so it was kind of hard to relate to her and even like her very much at times. She was taken from her family at a young age, and so I think this book kind of addressed some like systemic issues with Native families not being deemed, you know, like good enough to take care of their kids. And I liked seeing her reconnect with her family and start to care about people more. She seems to have some magical abilities, but they're not really well explained. And the rest of the characters were not super memorable to me, aside from maybe her grandmother. So I would not continue this series, unfortunately, but there were some interesting mythology bits, again, in the second half. So yeah, that was a very short review, but this was okay. There were some parts that I liked, again, with like this Alaskan folklore type elements, but the rest of it was like, meh, not a huge fan. So not sure I would necessarily recommend this one. So now we have a couple of 3.5-star books, and the first one I'll talk about is The Holly Jolly Diwali by Sonya Lalli. So this is adult romance where we follow Nikki, who's a data analyst who has tried to make practical decisions with every aspect of her life until she unexpectedly gets laid off. So she books a last-minute flight to India to go to her friend's wedding during Diwali. She hits it off with Sam, who's a musician, and must decide if she wants to keep making the same decisions or live a little bit more. So this was pretty fun overall, definitely easy to read. It's pretty fast-paced and humorous overall, so I definitely sped through it. I liked getting to see India here, even if some of this, you know, maybe seems more like a stereotype or assumptions at times. But yeah, I liked that this took place around Diwali and, you know, being set around this wedding. I think both of those were really interesting. Like, Diwali is not something I know that much about, so that was kind of cool. Nikki, as a main character, was mostly likable. I very much enjoyed how she's a data analyst, and I liked her journey of trying to figure out what to do with her life and take some risks to have fun. She is jealous of her older sister because Jasmine just kind of does whatever she wants, and Nikki feels like she has to be the good daughter. I liked the idea of Nikki reconnecting with her roots some, though this isn't fully explored. I do think she's smart and funny, and she's a good friend for the most part. It's nice to see her go from being really like career focused to trying to balance things and find something that she's really passionate about. The love interest Sam is also mostly likable. He's in a band but has some family pressure with that because that's not really like a secure career choice, I think, according to his parents. I did think they had a connection, but it did feel insta-lovey, and I hated how quickly Nikki was willing to give up her own life and career for him. This was like major cringe and really like the most negative thing I have to say about this book. It felt very out of character, though there is a little bit of an attempt to explain why she's like that, but I still didn't like it. I do like the resolution afterwards, at least, so that's something. So, yeah, I mean, I, again, don't think that I would necessarily reread this, but I think overall it was a very positive reading experience, and there were definitely some good aspects, and, like, I mean, most of the story was good, except for, like, that, yeah, the cringe insta-love and her being like, oh, I will give up everything for a man, which I was like, girl, no. So, other than that, I would recommend this book. So the next 3.5-star book I'll talk about is Five Total Strangers by Natalie D. Richards. So this is a YA thriller following Mira, and she's trying to get home for Christmas. When a blizzard cancels her flight, she ends up hitching a ride with a group of friendly college kids who are on her first flight. The weather gets worse, and someone seems to be sabotaging them. So this was a really fun Christmas thriller. I went in with low expectations, I think, because a lot of the reviews are kind of meh, but I had a good time with this. I found it to be pretty fast-paced and enjoyable, definitely engaging. I was really invested in this journey home and, what the hell was happening in the car with these people. It's perfect to read around Christmas, though, I made sure to not read it when I was traveling myself, which was probably a good choice given that I, in fact, had delays getting home as well. So, yeah, this is definitely a holidays don't go well sort of plot here. I think it feels very atmospheric with the snow and just like being very isolated because of this weather. And I love this in particular, especially when they're trying to find help and really can't. So I liked the tension of trying to get home and the creepiness that starts to set in, as things start to go wrong and someone just seems to have it out for them there, and, maybe there's somebody stalking them. I didn't find these stalker parts to be as nicely woven in as I maybe would have wanted, but, I still kept going back and forth on who it could be and, who's sabotaging them, and I did have a fun time with this. So Mira, our main character, is a teenager, and she's trying to go home to visit her mother and be supportive. She makes some incredibly dumb decisions that result in her being in these situations, so I had moments of wanting to yell at her, but I still had a good time following her. I think she pushes off her grief and bad feelings in a really not healthy way. Then some of the other characters, Harper seems nice on the plane, but there's definitely more to her at first glance. She's mostly supportive of Mira. And then we have the guys. One seems nice, one seems okay, but maybe has a darker side to him. And it's can't either be trusted. And then we have Kayla, who she was probably my least favorite character. She seems weird and slightly off, but I liked that, she has the same name as me. But anyway, yeah, so I think the characters were not particularly well developed, but I still had fun following them, and I would read more by this author and would certainly recommend this book if you're looking for a fun Christmas thriller. So now we'll move to 4-star books, and the first one I'll talk about is Sunreach by Brandon Sanderson and Janci Patterson. So this is a YA sci-fi novella set in the Skyward universe. And we follow FM back on detritus, learning more about these slugs and trying to fight against the superiority. So I had fun returning to this world and following Spence's teammates. I think this did a pretty good job of overall matching the general tone and feel of the main Skyward books. I don't think it feels like Sanderson's exact writing, but I think in general, it does a pretty good job with that. I think the pacing was good overall. We have some science and investigation type bits that aren't quite as fast paced, but I found them rather interesting still, as well as, battles and other frantic moments. So I really like seeing them investigate these slugs. I love them so much. There's a lot of cute moments and oh my goodness, they're just my favorite. I also enjoyed how FM gets really invested in them and wants to take care of them. I think it's interesting in general to see how other characters react to situations that we're familiar with, from the main books, or, it sets up Cytonic. I also like seeing how Spensa is perceived by others, and I think she almost has this sort of mythical or hero of legend type quality to her, with some hero worship, certainly. FM was fun to follow overall. I definitely like her. I think she's caring, especially to the slugs. Important, it's fun to see her banter with some of the other characters. She does act awkward around her crush, or is kind of oblivious to things sometimes, but she's very invested in her team, I think, and this does explore some of, what happens when you can't save everyone, and how do you deal with this. So I had a good time with this, definitely wanted to continue, and I did actually read the second Skyward novella. I think that's going to be in the next 10-book wrap-up, so we'll have that to look forward to, I guess. But yeah, so if you like the Skyward books, I would suggest picking this up. I don't think this is probably a good place to jump into the books, because it does reference, the main novels that have come before this. But yeah, if you like this series, pick up this novella. So the other 4-star book I'll talk about is Fated Blades by Ilona Andrews. So this is adult sci-fi romance set in the world of the Kinsmen, where we have two rival families with genetically enhanced abilities, and they're constantly fighting each other for power. So a betrayal from within causes Ramona and Matthias, and they're from opposing families, to team up to prevent a secret from leaking. And, you know, of course they discover a passion that's simmering between them. So this is, I think, like the third or fourth installment of the Kinsman universe. There's like, I don't know. There's definitely like 2 books, and then there's one that I think is technically like a novella. So it depends on how you classify those, but I guess. Anyway, I liked this, but I didn't quite love it as much as most of their other books, perhaps because it was more focused on military things. Like, I'm not entirely sure why I didn't love it as much, but I felt like a bit detached from the characters and situation, I think, for a lot of the book. The pacing was all right. It did take me a little bit to get into it, but things definitely start to pick up. I continue to really find this world rather interesting. We have these kinsmen with like different genetically enhanced abilities. Here we focus on the Sakari, I don't know, who are fighters and essentially have like a weapon embedded in their arms that can be manipulated into like shields, swords, etc. So they're feared by a lot of society, so it's really interesting to learn more about them. I liked the abilities, though it was rather confusing at first to figure out like, okay, how do I picture exactly what they're doing? But I liked this vengeance quest that we have, trying to recover secrets and, you know, teaming up with the family enemy. That was fun. I particularly liked the culmination of this in the end. It's very exciting, like an excellent ending. And of course, you know, we deal with politics and a new foe along the way. So I think this is an interesting introduction to this potential new enemy, and I do wonder if we'll see them again. So in terms of our main characters, Matthias is kind of a scary dude and definitely will not put up with a threat to his family. I think Ramona is also not to be trifled with, but she seems a lot nicer and actually like cultivates relationships by being a good person and getting to know people. So both are extremely skilled fighters, but have strengths that complement each other. And it's really fun to see them spar together, both like physically and verbally. Both, I think, are the types who need a very strong partner who's willing to push back to keep things interesting. Both of them are betrayed, and I like seeing them team up, and I did feel their chemistry, but I think it took a bit longer than usual to actually, like, get there, I guess. So we do have some good banter throughout, though, and I did like that. So I enjoyed this, obviously. Like, it's not my favorite installment of the Kinsman universe, but I will absolutely continue reading this because I read everything that Ilona Andrews writes. So, you know, I guess actually, you know, you could theoretically jump in here because all of the Kinsman universe books are like follow different couples, so that would probably be okay. But I would personally recommend, you know, starting at the beginning and then just because that serves as like an introduction to the world. And I think some of the characters mentioned in earlier books come up again here briefly. But anyway, yeah. So if you're looking for some sci-fi romance, definitely recommend this series overall. So now we get to 2 5-star books, and the first one I'll talk about is A Stitch in Time by Kelley Armstrong. So this is the first book in this like adult paranormal, murder mystery, time travel, romance. There's a lot of different genres here. And we follow Bronwyn, who used to pass through this time slip of 200 years to visit William until a tragedy occurs and the house is shuttered. So 20 years later, she inherits this manor, and William is waiting, but he's no longer the boy she remembers. She must deal with ghosts and uncover a scandal and other mysteries. So I really love this. I'm not surprised. I love Kelley Armstrong. She's an auto-buy author for me. It feels very, like, cozy, but also very exciting because we've got so many different elements going on here. You know, we have this time travel, ghosts, murders, more, and I think all of these elements were extremely interesting to me, and they blended together to make like such a cool story. I loved how everything comes together. And it definitely, I think, kept me guessing with a lot of the particulars, especially with like the, you know, murder mystery elements. There are some sad moments, some alarming moments here, and I definitely felt for these characters and the situations that they're in. I liked both the past and present kind of like timelines, I guess, and how Bronwyn moved between the two. She's had some troubles and has inherited this house and, you know, like wants to restore it. I liked her journey of trying to deal with some of her past and bad memories, and I think she's trying to move forward by moving back in time, so that's kind of fun. But I liked her integrating into the village and making friends here. She's a wonderful main character to follow. So she is older. I think she's 38 in this book, and she's widowed. So this made for a really nice change of pace because, you know, I think you don't see a lot of like older widowed characters in a lot of sci-fi and fantasy books. She's sure of herself in a lot of ways, which is really fun to see, especially when it comes to William. She doesn't trust her own memories because of some circumstances surrounding the last time she was at this house, and I really enjoyed seeing her investigate what's going on and believe in herself more. I think she's very compassionate, so even though the ghosts are scary, she tries to figure out what's going on with them because she wants to help. She also doesn't put up with shit from William and knows like how to walk away from arguments while still understanding that they care for each other. So I definitely enjoyed the romance and how they communicate with each other even when she's not like physically there in the past. William is also pretty sweet, and I love how accepting he is of her. I think some things take a bit, but he's nice overall. There's definitely some mystery to him, you know, with like how has he changed since she last saw him, and I loved unraveling all of this. I think he does have a temper sometimes, but he's a good match for Bronwyn overall. Now, I did like some of the side characters as well. In particular, there's one couple from the village, one of whom is transgender, and it's, you know, really nice to see Bronwyn like easily ask what pronouns to use, especially when not everyone is open-minded, visitors in particular. Like, a lot of the other villagers are like, oh yeah, we just know this person, and like, we'll refer to them however they want to be referred to. Then we have one of William's friends overall who seems kind and has some tragedies himself, and I think this is setting us up for the next story following different characters, so I'm really interested to follow them, but also revisit these characters. So if you, I mean, I loved this. I would absolutely recommend it. You know, if you liked any of these elements that I mentioned with like ghosts, time travel, murder mysteries, definitely recommend picking this one up. So finally, the last 5-star book I'll talk about today is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. So this is adult historical urban fantasy following Theodora, who is cursed by a fairy and has no sense of fear, embarrassment, or even happiness. She just wants to avoid upsetting her cousin's chances at a husband during this London season, but when the Lord Sorcier of, I have no clue if I pronounced that right, of England learns of her condition, she's drawn into a world of magic. So this was really lovely and cozy. I definitely want more in this world. I think already bought the second book in the series. The pacing is good. I think it feels more like a slice of life book almost, where, you know, like not a ton is necessarily happening in terms of action, but I was very invested in the mysteries and life of Dora. It definitely starts off with a bang, where we're first introduced to Dora and her affliction. I think this world is rather intriguing. It's Regency era with magic, fairy, you know, I think the magic itself is rather charming and also terrible depending on the user. I think this has a nice and important message overall. It's like, even though things can be terrible and overwhelming, where you feel like you personally may not be able to make a difference, it's still worth doing what you can to try to improve things. I think this book does have some humor to it as well. Like, there are some very amusing situations, in particular, some of them at, like, the balls that happen here. We also have several mysteries here, including what happened to Dora, as well as this mysterious sleeping plague. So I found both of those to be pretty compelling. I think both of these blended well together. Dora is fabulous, though. So she doesn't feel emotions as strongly because, you know, she has half a soul, right? But it's interesting to see how she describes feelings when she's a bit detached from them. I think she's kind of awkward in society because her reactions aren't always like what's expected, so people think she's really strange. But she's pretty blunt, which is often hilarious to me, and I appreciate how she just says what she thinks. She's very intelligent and caring, though, and wants to make a difference. I think her cousin Vanessa is sweet, but very sheltered. She can be very caring as well, but it's more so like when she actually knows them in person versus the abstract. Then we have Elias, who's like, you know, this Lord Sorcier of England. He's very grumpy, so we do get kind of a grump and sunshine dynamic. He's, like this Lord Magician of England, and he wants to make a difference and is often frustrated when high society doesn't do as much as it could to contribute to society as a whole. I really like seeing both him and Dora together. I think she calls him out on things, and he becomes a better person for it. I like seeing him teach Dora some things and, like, help with her problem. I think he can be really fanciful, which is fun to see as well. And, like, again, I think Dora really brings out the good in him, and so, like, oh my god, they're adorable. So then we have Albert, who's his friend, who's also very nice. He gets along really well with Dora, and I feel like they could be really good friends. So he also wants to make a difference, and I liked his overall story. So this was just such a delightful book. I am so glad that I read this. I think this was perfect for the winter with, like, just being, like, cozy, and I don't know, I just loved it so much. It just was wonderful. Oh my goodness. And, you know, like, I do enjoy any sort of, like, fairy tale type thing, so just all of these elements combined well for me. Highly recommend this one, you know, especially if you're looking for that, like, cozy historical urban fantasy type of feel. And yeah, I definitely need to get to the sequel soon, hopefully. So with that, those are the 10 books that I'm going to talk to you about in this particular wrap up, I guess, and hopefully I can continue to catch up on reviews. So I guess let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. And for your question of the day, have you read any Christmas thrillers? I know it's like months late for this question, but whatever, that's all I got for you. So yeah, so I do have a Discord channel, and if you want to join that, the link's in the description below. Again, not that I'm like super active on it, but you know, it exists at least. But I hope you're all having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.